The first alien ship appeared on Earth's sensors like a silver needle against the black of space. Admiral Chun Wei watched the readings from the command center of Luna Base, his coffee growing cold as more ships materialized around the outer planets. They moved with impossible grace, their hulls smooth and flowing like liquid metal. "How many now?" Chun asked his sensor operator. 47 ships, sir. All different sizes. The largest one is, well, it's bigger than anything we've ever built. Chun nodded grimly. Humanity had been expecting this day since they first ventured beyond their solar system and found evidence of other civilizations. The question was never if aliens would find Earth, but when and whether they would come in peace. The answer came 3 hours later when the alien fleet broadcast a message. The translation software worked surprisingly well, suggesting these beings had been watching humanity for some time. "Primitive species of the third planet," the message began. "You will surrender your system to the Zephyrian Confederation. Resistance will result in pacification. You have 1 solar rotation to comply." Chum looked around the command center at his officers. Earth's Space Navy consisted of 32 ships, most of them converted mining vessels with weapons bolted on. Against 47 alien warships with unknown technology, the smart choice was obvious. "Send a reply," Chun said. "Tell them we need more time to discuss terms." But even as he said it, Chun was already thinking about Earth's defenses. The orbital platforms around Earth and Mars were armed with railguns and missile systems. Primitive by alien standards, perhaps, but they were what humanity had. The aliens gave them 6 more hours. When Earth's response was a polite request for peaceful negotiations, the Zephyrian fleet moved into attack formation. The first alien ship to engage was a sleek cruiser half the size of a human destroyer. It approached the outer defense platform near Jupiter's orbit, and Chun watched in amazement as it fired. There was no flash, no explosion, just a beam of purple light that touched the platform. The massive metal structure simply vanished, converted to vapor in an instant. "Dear God," whispered the communications officer. The platform's crew of 200 people had been vaporized before they could even send a distress signal. But their automated systems had recorded everything, and the data was already streaming back to Lunabase. Dr. Sarah Kim, Chun's science advisor, studied the readings with growing excitement. "Admiral, their weapons are energy-based. Pure energy. Look at these power signatures. Is that good or bad for us?" Chun asked. "It's interesting," Sarah replied. "Their weapons are incredibly sophisticated, but our defense platforms are still transmitting. The railguns and missile tubes are intact." Chun felt a spark of hope. "You mean their super weapons missed our weapons?" "No, sir. I think they hit exactly what they were aiming for. They destroyed the platform's power core and life support. But they might not see our weapons as threats worth targeting." The next engagement proved Sarah's theory. A Zephyrian destroyer approached the defense platform at Mars. This time, Chun was ready. As soon as the alien ship came within range, he gave the order. "All platforms, open fire." The railgun fired first. It was a simple weapon, really just a magnetic tube that accelerated a tungsten rod to tremendous speed. No complex targeting systems, no exotic energy. Just mass times velocity equals devastating impact. The tungsten rod hit the Zephyrian destroyer at 15 kilometers per second. The alien ship's hull, designed to deflect energy beams, crumpled like paper. Atmosphere vented from a dozen holes as the ship tumbled out of control. The command center erupted in cheers, but Chun raised his hand for silence. On the screen, the damaged alien ship was still moving. Its weapons were still active. Platform 7, fire missiles. Chun ordered. 12 nuclear-tipped missiles streaked toward the wounded alien ship. The vessel tried to shoot them down with its energy weapons and managed to destroy 8 of them. But 4 missiles got through, and when they exploded, the alien destroyer came apart in a brilliant flash. The Zephyrian fleet pulled back, clearly surprised. Chun allowed himself a small smile. Humanity had drawn first blood. Or Commander. The Isis studied the tactical display aboard her flagship with growing confusion. The humans had destroyed one of her ships using projectile weapons? She ran the analysis again, but the results were the same. "Explain this to me," she said to her science officer. "How did a primitive kinetic weapon penetrate our shields?" "The projectile carried tremendous momentum, Commander," the officer replied. "Our shield systems are designed to disperse energy attacks. They cannot efficiently absorb kinetic impact." The Isis frowned. In 300 years of warfare, the Confederation had never encountered a species that still used physical projectiles in space combat. It seemed impossibly primitive. Yet somehow, these humans had destroyed a modern warship with what amounted to a thrown rock. "Recommend new tactics," the Isis ordered. "Maintain distance and use our energy weapons at maximum range," the science officer suggested. "Their projectile weapons have limited reach compared to our particle beams." But when the Zephyrian fleet attacked again, they discovered that human ingenuity extended beyond simple railguns. The defense platforms launched clouds of small missiles that split into dozens of smaller warheads. The alien point defense systems, designed to stop energy attacks, struggled to target so many tiny physical objects. More concerning were the human ships themselves. Unlike the elegant Zephyrian vessels with their flowing lines and minimal armor, human warships looked like flying fortresses. When Tice's energy weapons struck them, the human ships absorbed tremendous damage, but kept fighting. The battle raged for 6 hours. When it ended, both fleets had pulled back to lick their wounds. The Zephyrians had lost 3 ships and had 7 more damaged. The humans had lost 2 defense platforms and had 3 ships badly hurt. For the Confederation, it was a shocking outcome. They had expected to sweep aside these primitives in minutes, not fight them to a standstill. Aboard Luna Base, Chen was equally surprised, but for different reasons. His ships and platforms had performed far better than he had dared hope. The aliens' energy weapons were devastating, but they seemed to have weaknesses. "They fight like artists," Chun told his staff during the post-battle briefing. "Everything precise and elegant. But sometimes a rock to the head works better than a surgical laser." Dr. Kim pulled up the damage reports. "Their weapons are incredibly advanced, but I think that might be their weakness. They're so used to fighting other energy weapon species that they don't know how to handle kinetic attacks." Chun studied the tactical display, already planning for the next engagement. The aliens would be back, probably with new tactics. But humanity had proven something important. Advanced didn't always mean superior. "Send a message to Earth Command," Chun ordered. "Tell them we're going to need every ship, every platform, and every missile we can get. This is going to be a long war." He paused, then added with a grim smile, "And tell them to keep building those railguns. Apparently, we brought rocks to a laser fight, and somehow that's working." Dr. Elena Vasquez had spent her entire career studying theoretical physics. But now she found herself in a military bunker, 3 kilometers under the Rocky Mountains, trying to understand why rocks could beat lasers. The captured Zephyrian technology sat on the examination table like a piece of alien art. The weapon was beautiful in its complexity, with crystalline components that seemed to bend light around themselves. Elena had been studying it for 2 weeks, and the more she learned, the more amazed she became. "It's incredible," she told General Morrison, who had flown in from Earth Command. "This weapon can convert matter directly into energy at the quantum level. It's more advanced than anything we ever imagined possible." "But our railguns still punched right through their ships," Morrison replied. "How does that work?" Elena picked up a chunk of tungsten from her desk. the same material used in human kinetic rounds. General, imagine you've spent your whole life learning to catch baseballs. You get really good at it. Then someone throws a bowling ball at you. Morrison frowned. I'd probably get knocked over. Exactly. The Zephyrians have been fighting energy weapons for thousands of years. Their shields can absorb, deflect, or disperse almost any kind of energy attack. But kinetic energy? Mass in motion? That's different. Elena activated a holographic display showing the physics equations. When we fire a railgun, we're accelerating mass to tremendous speeds. The energy is stored as momentum. When that tungsten rod hits their ship, all that energy has to go somewhere. Their shields can't just absorb it like they do with laser beams. The door opened and Admiral Chun walked in, looking tired from the long flight from Luna Base. Dr. Vasquez, I need you to explain something to me. Why are we winning battles with weapons that are thousands of years old in concept? Elena gestured to the alien device. Because sometimes the simplest solution is the best one. Look at how this weapon works. She activated another display. To fire this, the Zephyrian ship needs to generate a quantum field, align the molecular disruptor, calculate targeting data for moving targets, and maintain power flow through 17 different systems. She picked up a model of a human railgun. To fire this, we need electricity and a piece of metal. That's it. No complex targeting computers, no quantum fields, no exotic energy. Just good old-fashioned physics. Mass times velocity equals force. Chun sat down heavily. Are you saying our weapons are better because they're simpler? Not better, Elena corrected. Different. The Zephyrians built their weapons to fight other Zephyrians. Energy shields, energy weapons, energy everything. They forgot about the fundamental forces. General Morrison leaned forward. What do you mean? Elena walked to the whiteboard and began writing equations. Newton's laws of motion. These are universal constants. No matter how advanced you become, you can't change the fact that a moving object carries kinetic energy proportional to its mass and velocity squared. She drew a simple diagram. The Zephyrians think kinetic weapons are primitive because they require physical ammunition. They see it as wasteful and limited. But what they don't understand is that kinetic energy is one of the most efficient ways to deliver force. Admiral Chun studied the equations. So our primitive weapons work because they're based on physics that can't be changed? Exactly. You can deflect a laser beam with mirrors. You can absorb particle beams with energy fields. But try stopping a telegram tungsten rod moving at 15 kilometers per second. The only way to stop it is to absorb all that kinetic energy. And that's exactly what their ship's hulls have to do when our rounds hit. Elena pulled up another display showing battle footage from the recent engagement. Look at this. The Zephyrian ship tries to intercept our missile with an energy beam. The missile explodes, but the fragments keep moving forward with enough momentum to damage the alien ship's hull. General Morrison whistled softly. So they literally can't stop our attacks? They can, Elena said, but they'd have to completely redesign their defensive systems. And here's the beautiful part. Even if they build kinetic-resistant armor, that makes their ships heavier, which affects their speed and maneuverability. Chun was beginning to understand. We're forcing them to change their entire way of fighting. More than that, Elena replied excitedly. We're forcing them to remember physics. They'd become so sophisticated that they forgot the basics. She activated a new simulation. I've been working on something I call the Doctrine of Momentum. Instead of trying to match their energy weapons, we double down on kinetic force. The simulation showed human ships firing not just railguns, but accelerated masses of all kinds. Asteroid chunks, metal debris, even ice blocks accelerated to tremendous speeds. The math is beautiful, Elena continued. A 1-ton piece of rock moving at 10% of light speed carries more destructive energy than most of their weapons. And here's the key. It doesn't matter what their shields are designed to stop. Momentum is momentum. Admiral Chun stared at the simulation. You're talking about turning our entire fleet into giant slingshots. That's exactly what I'm talking about. But not just our fleet. Look at this. Elena showed them a new design. A ship built around a single massive railgun. The entire vessel exists to accelerate projectiles to relativistic speeds. General Morrison looked skeptical. Would that even work? The physics checks out, Elena assured him. One shot from a relativistic kinetic weapon could disable or destroy any known Zephyrian ship. They simply have no defense against that much concentrated momentum. Elena pulled up more data. I've been studying their military history through the captured databases. For the last 3,000 years, every species they've conquered used energy-based weapons. The Zephyrians have never had to deal with a civilization that still used kinetic force as a primary weapon. Chun was quiet for a long moment. You're saying we have an advantage because we never forgot how to throw rocks. Humanity never stopped thinking about projectiles, Elena confirmed. Bullets, arrows, catapults, cannons, railguns, it's all the same principle. Accelerate mass, aim at target, let physics do the rest. She brought up a historical comparison. The Zephyrians probably went through a kinetic weapons phase in their early development, just like we did. But when they discovered energy weapons, they abandoned kinetic force completely. They thought they were evolving beyond it. But we kept both, Morrison realized. Exactly. We developed lasers and particle beams, but we also kept improving our kinetic weapons. We never saw them as primitive. We saw them as complementary. Elena walked back to the Zephyrian device. This weapon represents the peak of energy weapon technology. It's absolutely beautiful, but it's also incredibly complex and vulnerable to disruption. Our railgun represents the peak of kinetic weapon technology. It's simple, reliable, and nearly impossible to counter. Admiral Chun stood up. Dr. Vasquez, I want you to work with our engineers. If we're going to fight this war, we need to understand every advantage we have. Already started, Elena replied with a grin. I've been developing training programs to teach our military leaders about momentum-based tactics. The key is thinking about warfare in terms of physics rather than technology. She activated one final display. The Zephyrians fight elegant wars. Precise, sophisticated, beautiful even. But sometimes you don't need elegant. Sometimes you just need a really big rock moving really fast. General Morrison laughed despite himself. So our battle doctrine is to throw rocks harder than anyone else in the galaxy? The doctrine of momentum, Elena confirmed. And General, based on the physics, I don't think anyone in the galaxy throws rocks quite like humanity does. The construction yards around Earth worked day and night, building ships that would have horrified any Zephyrian engineer. The new human dreadnought looked like a flying cannon with engines attached to it. Most of the ship's mass was dedicated to a single massive railgun that ran the entire length of the vessel. Captain, Sarah Torres stood on the bridge of the U.S. Momentum, humanity's first dedicated kinetic warfare vessel. Through the viewports, she could see the enormous barrel of the ship's main gun extending forward like the horn of some ancient beast. Weapon status? She asked her gunnery officer. Main gun charged and ready, Captain. We've got 50 tungsten penetrators loaded, each one weighing 200 kilograms. Firing velocity will be 15% of light speed. Torres nodded grimly. Each shot from their main gun would carry more kinetic energy than most nuclear weapons. The recoil alone would push their ship backward several kilometers, which was why they needed such powerful engines. "Enemy contacts approaching," reported the sensor operator. 12 Zephyrian ships, including 2 of their new heavy cruisers. Torres had read the intelligence reports. The Zephyrians had adapted their tactics since the early battles, developing new shields and armor specifically designed to handle kinetic weapons. But humanity had been adapting too. "Signal the fleet," Torres ordered. "Begin Operation Anvil." Around Earth's solar system, similar scenes were playing out. Humanity had embraced Dr. Vasquez's doctrine of momentum completely, building an entire new generation of kinetic weapons. Not just railguns, but mass drivers that could accelerate asteroids to tremendous speeds. The first salvo came from the orbital mass drivers hidden in the asteroid belt. These weapons were simple in concept but devastating in practice. They used magnetic fields to accelerate chunks of rock and metal to significant fractions of light speed, then launched them at enemy targets. War Commander Dizes watched from her flagship as the human attack began. On her tactical display, she saw hundreds of small contacts moving toward her fleet at impossible speeds. "Defensive fire," she ordered. "Destroy those projectiles." Her ships opened fire with their energy weapons, and many of the incoming rocks were vaporized. But the humans had learned from previous battles. For every projectile destroyed, fragments continued on their original trajectory, still carrying enough momentum to cause damage. "Commander," reported her tactical officer, "we're detecting larger masses approaching from multiple vectors." Dizes studied the display and felt a chill of understanding. The humans weren't just throwing rocks anymore. They were throwing mountains. The first asteroid impact hit a Zephyrian destroyer. The rock was only 50 meters across, but it was moving at 8% of light speed. When it hit the alien ship, the destroyer simply ceased to exist, converted to plasma by the incredible energy of the impact. "This is impossible," Dizes muttered. "They're using asteroids as weapons." Her science officer was frantically running calculations. "Commander, they've somehow accelerated these masses to relativistic speeds. The energy requirements should be enormous." But Dizes was beginning to understand human thinking. They didn't see the energy requirements as a problem. They saw them as an opportunity to store incredible amounts of destructive force in simple projectiles. "All ships, evasive maneuvers," she ordered. But even as she gave the command, she knew it was useless. How do you dodge a mountain moving at a significant fraction of light speed? Captain Torres watched the battle unfold with grim satisfaction. The Zephyrians were trying to adapt, but they were fighting against physics itself. Their elegant ships simply couldn't absorb the massive kinetic energies that humanity was delivering. "Target the lead cruiser," she ordered. "Main gun, single shot." The UES Momentum's massive railgun fired with a flash of electromagnetic energy. The tungsten penetrator accelerated down the barrel, gaining speed until it reached 15% of light speed. At that velocity, the small metal rod carried the destructive force of a nuclear weapon. The Zephyrian cruiser's shields flared as they tried to absorb the impact. For a moment, Torres thought they might succeed. Then the penetrator punched through the energy field like it wasn't there, went completely through the alien ship, and continued into space, leaving 2 perfect holes in the cruiser's hull. The alien ship died quietly, its atmosphere venting into space as its crew struggled with explosive decompression. "Reload," Torres ordered. "Next target." Across the solar system, the battle continued. Human ships designed around the doctrine of momentum engaged Zephyrian vessels that had ruled the galaxy for millennia. The aliens fought with sophisticated energy weapons that could delete matter from existence. The humans responded with simple kinetic force applied with devastating efficiency. The turning point came when humanity deployed their secret weapon, the asteroid protocol. Hidden mass drivers throughout the solar system, began accelerating entire asteroids toward the Zephyrian fleet concentration near Jupiter. War Commander Thizes saw them coming on long-range sensors. Rocks the size of skyscrapers, moving at velocities that made her mind reel. Each one carried enough kinetic energy to destroy her entire fleet. "Can we intercept them?" she asked desperately. Her weapons officer shook his head. "Our energy weapons can break them apart, but the fragments will continue on course. And there are too many to stop them all." Thizes made the hardest decision of her military career. "All ships, retreat to hyperspace. We cannot win this engagement." As the Zephyrian fleet fled, Captain Torres allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. They had done the impossible, forced the most powerful military force in the galaxy to retreat using nothing but rocks and rails. But she knew this was just the beginning. The Zephyrians would be back, probably with new weapons and tactics designed to counter humanity's kinetic advantage. Dr. Elena Vasquez was already working on the next phase. In her laboratory, she was designing weapons that would have seemed like magic to previous generations. Railguns that could fire continuously, mass drivers powered by fusion reactors, and kinetic bombardment systems that could accelerate projectiles to 20% of light speed. "The beautiful thing about momentum," she explained to her engineering team, "is that it scales up perfectly. Want more destructive force? Use more mass or more velocity. The math never changes." Her newest design was a ship killer that existed purely as a delivery system for kinetic energy. The vessel would accelerate a single massive projectile to near light speed, then detonate its own fusion reactor to add even more energy to the impact. "That's basically a suicide weapon," one engineer pointed out. "All weapons are suicide weapons if you think about it," Elena replied cheerfully. "The difference is whether you're the one being destroyed." Meanwhile, aboard her retreating flagship, War Commander Thizes was having a very different conversation with her tactical staff. The humans had just demonstrated weapons that defied her understanding of civilized warfare. "They turned their entire star system into a weapon," she said, studying the battle recordings. "Every asteroid, every moon, every piece of debris becomes a potential projectile." Her science officer nodded grimly. "Their industrial capacity is focused entirely on accelerating masses to destructive velocities. They've weaponized physics itself. How do we counter this?" Thizes asked. "We would need to develop completely new defensive systems," the officer replied. "Energy shields are useless against kinetic weapons of this magnitude. We would need physical armor thick enough to absorb relativistic impacts." Thizes understood the implications. To build armor that could stop humanity's kinetic weapons would require ships so massive they could barely move. The elegant, swift vessels that had given the Confederation its military advantage would become slow, clumsy targets. "There is another option," her science officer said quietly. "We could develop our own kinetic weapons." The bridge fell silent. For a species that prided itself on technological sophistication, the idea of building crude projectile weapons was almost insulting. But as Thizes watched the recordings of human asteroids destroying her ships, she realized that sometimes crude was exactly what you needed. "Begin research immediately," she ordered. "If the humans want to fight with rocks, then we'll learn to throw rocks too." But even as she gave the order, Thizes knew they were fighting at a disadvantage. The humans had never stopped thinking about kinetic weapons. They had thousands of years of experience in making things go fast and hit hard. The Zephyrians were starting from zero. Captain Torres received the intelligence reports about Zephyrian research into kinetic weapons with interest but not concern. Let them try to copy humanity's approach. By the time they figured out how to throw rocks properly, humans would be throwing planets. The first alien species to arrive at Earth came in secret, their ship hidden among the wreckage of a destroyed Zephyrian fleet. Ambassador Chun Wei, Admiral Chun's brother and Earth's new diplomatic liaison, watched nervously as the strange vessel docked with Luna Station. The creatures that emerged were insectoid, with 6 limbs and compound eyes that reflected the station's lights like jewels. Their translator device crackled with static as their leader spoke. "We are the Crethari Collective," the being said. "We have watched your battles with the Confederation. We wish to learn your rock-throwing methods." Dr. Elena Vasquez, now director of the newly formed Kinetic Warfare Academy, couldn't help but smile at the translation. Over the past months, word of humanity's success had spread throughout the galaxy, carried by traders and refugees from Zephyrin expansion. "Welcome," Elena said. "We'd be happy to share our knowledge. But first, tell me about your own military history." The Crethari leader, who introduced himself as Hive Speaker Crix, activated a holographic display. "We developed projectile weapons in our early civilization, like most species. But when we encountered Confederation technology 2 centuries ago, we abandoned them as primitive." Elena studied the display with growing excitement. The Crethari had actually developed quite sophisticated kinetic weapons before the Zephyrians arrived. Mass drivers, railguns, even kinetic orbital bombardment systems. They had simply stopped using them when they assumed energy weapons were superior. "You didn't need to abandon them," Elena explained. "You needed to improve them." Over the following weeks, more species arrived. The aquatic delphinids came from the ocean worlds of the Kepler system. The crystalline shard mines arrived from the mineral-rich worlds of the galactic rim. Each species brought their own perspective on warfare and technology. Captain Sarah Torres, now promoted to Admiral and Commander of the Kinetic Warfare School's Practical Training Division, was amazed by the diversity of approaches to projectile weapons. "The delphinids use water as ammunition," she told Elena after a training session. "They accelerate streams of liquid to near light speed." It sounds crazy, but the physics work perfectly. Elena nodded enthusiastically. "And the shard mines grow their ammunition. They can literally cultivate crystal projectiles with specific properties for different targets." The Crethari had perhaps the most interesting approach. Their hive mind allowed them to coordinate kinetic strikes with incredible precision. They could launch thousands of small projectiles simultaneously, creating a devastating barrage that was nearly impossible to defend against. Each species sees kinetic warfare differently, Elena realized. But they all understand the fundamental principle: momentum is universal. The Academy quickly became a hub of innovation. Species that had never met before were sharing ideas about how to make things move very fast and hit very hard. The results were often spectacular. The delphinids' liquid projectile system inspired human engineers to develop ice ammunition that would vaporize on impact, creating devastating pressure waves. The shard mine's crystal technology led to smart ammunition that could change course mid-flight to track moving targets. But it was the Crethari who made the breakthrough that changed everything. Hive Speaker Crix approached Elena with an idea that made her eyes light up. "Our collective consciousness allows us to control multiple projectile streams simultaneously. But what if we shared this control with other species?" Elena immediately understood the implications. Network targeting. Multiple species coordinating kinetic strikes across entire star systems. The first test of the integrated kinetic network took place in the Tau Ceti system, where a Zephyrian expansion fleet was attempting to subjugate the local population. The defenders included human ships, Crethari swarm vessels, delphinid water launchers, and shard mine crystal bombarders. War Commander Thysis led the Zephyrian force personally, confident that her new kinetic-resistant armor would protect her ships from primitive projectile attacks. Her confidence lasted exactly 12 seconds after the battle began. The networked kinetic attack was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Human railguns fired tungsten penetrators in precise timing with Crathori micro-projectile swarms. Delphinid water streams followed split seconds later, exploiting the holes punched by the solid ammunition. Shard mine crystal bombs finished the sequence, their fragments tracking and destroying any ship that tried to escape. "This is impossible," Thysis muttered as she watched her fleet being systematically destroyed. "They're fighting as a single organism." Her tactical officer was frantically analyzing the attack patterns. "Commander, they're using their different kinetic weapons in sequence. Each attack prepares the target for the next one." Thysis realized with growing horror that the galaxy was learning to fight like humans, not just using kinetic weapons, but thinking about warfare in terms of physics and momentum rather than technology and sophistication. "All ships, retreat immediately," she ordered. "We cannot engage this force." As the Zephyrian fleet fled, Admiral Torres smiled grimly. The Academy was working better than anyone had hoped. But she knew they were just getting started. Elena was already working on the next phase of galactic kinetic education. The Academy had attracted species from across the galaxy, all eager to learn humanity's approach to warfare. But more importantly, they were all contributing their own innovations. "We're not just teaching them to copy our weapons," Elena explained to Admiral Chun during one of their regular briefings. "We're teaching them to think about kinetic energy as a fundamental force." The Academy's latest project was a joint venture between 6 different species. A kinetic platform that could accelerate asteroids to 30% of light speed. The engineering challenges were enormous, but each species contributed their own expertise. The humans provided the basic railgun technology and engineering knowledge. The Crathiri contributed their precision targeting systems. The Delphinids designed the cooling systems needed to handle the enormous energies involved. The shard mines created the crystalline components that could withstand the magnetic forces. 2 newer species, the gas giant dwelling aerials and the machine civilization synthetics, added their own innovations. "It's the most powerful kinetic weapon ever built," Elena told the assembled representatives. But more importantly, it represents a new way of thinking about cooperation and warfare. The synthetics representative, a being that looked like a walking collection of geometric shapes, expressed concern through its translation unit. The Confederation will not ignore this development. They will adapt their tactics. "Of course they will," Elena agreed. "But that's the beautiful thing about the doctrine of momentum. The fundamental physics can't be changed. They can develop better armor, faster ships, more sophisticated shields. But they can't change the fact that kinetic energy is kinetic energy." Meanwhile, in a secret facility deep in Zephyrian space, War Commander Thysis was having a very different conversation with the Confederation's top scientists. The humans and their allies had fundamentally altered the balance of power in the galaxy, and the Confederation was struggling to respond. "We've developed new armor that can absorb kinetic impacts up to 20% of light speed," one scientist reported. "But it makes our ships so massive they're barely mobile." Another scientist activated a display showing Zephyrian attempts at kinetic weapons. "We've built several railgun prototypes, but they're inferior to human designs. We lack their experience with projectile weapons." Thysis studied the reports with growing frustration. The Confederation had spent thousands of years perfecting energy weapons, but they were starting from zero with kinetic technology. Meanwhile, the humans were teaching half the galaxy their methods. "How many species have joined this academy of theirs?" she asked. "Intelligence reports suggest over 40 species are now using human-derived kinetic weapons," came the reply. "The number is growing daily." Thysis realized that the Confederation was facing more than a military challenge. They were facing a philosophical revolution. The humans hadn't just introduced new weapons. They had introduced a new way of thinking about warfare. "Prepare the fleet for a major offensive," she ordered. "If we can't match their kinetic weapons, we'll have to overwhelm them with superior numbers and energy firepower." But even as she gave the order, Daijis knew she was fighting against more than just enemy weapons. She was fighting against the fundamental laws of physics. And those laws didn't care how sophisticated or advanced the Zephyrian Confederation thought it was. Back at the Academy, Elena received reports of Zephyrian fleet movements with interest, but not alarm. Let them come with their energy weapons and superior numbers. The galaxy was learning to throw rocks, and rocks, as any human child could tell you, were very good at breaking things. The siege of the Zephyrian homeworld began with the largest kinetic bombardment in galactic history. Ships from 43 different species surrounded the planet, each one armed with weapons based on humanity's doctrine of momentum. The planet's surface gleamed under a shield powered by its own star, a defensive system so advanced it seemed like magic. Dr. Elena Vasquez stood on the bridge of the U.S. Newton, humanity's newest and most powerful kinetic warfare vessel. Around her, holographic displays showed the orbital positions of hundreds of allied ships, all coordinating their attacks through the network targeting system developed at the Academy. "Shield strength holding at maximum," reported the Crothuri tactical coordinator, his compound eyes reflecting the data streams. "The stellar-powered defense grid is absorbing all kinetic impacts." Elena nodded calmly. She had expected this. The Zephyrians wouldn't have made their final stand without their most advanced defensive technology. But that was exactly what she had been counting on. "Signal all ships," she ordered. "Begin Phase 1 of the feedback protocol." War Commander Daijis watched from the planet's command center as the Allied fleet began their bombardment. Tungsten rods, crystal projectiles, water streams, and exotic ammunition types struck her planet's shield in carefully timed sequences. The stellar power